This is the story of a sea perched in the far north, a sea where Russia forged a polar destiny. It's called the White Sea because of the ice and fog that cover it most of the year. My name is Cédric Gras. For years, I've crisscrossed the Russian Federation, fascinated by its geography and its mosaic of ethnicities. But today, I'm heading out in search of what is called the Russian North, the part of the Arctic where the Slavs settled 10 centuries ago. It's a region of pristine taigas populated by izbas made of larch, in the midst of which a pioneering, spiritual, and sometimes tragic story played out. I feverishly read the stories of the conquest of the North. I'm about to go around this White Sea to better understand where and how the Russians became a people of the cold. Crossed by the Arctic Circle, the White Sea was colonized in the 12th century by subjects from the old Republic of Novgorod, one of the states of medieval Russia. These pioneers distinguished themselves by their daring Arctic navigations, where they fished and hunted seals. They allowed Russian civilization to expand eastward and northward, thus preparing the conquest of Siberia. I wanted to go on this trip because the White Sea is quite absent today from the concerns of geopolitics and geography. Everyone's forgotten about it, and yet it was one of the cradles of Russia. On these shores, a people called the Pomors was forged in the grip of ice and snow. It is the most Arctic face of Russian civilization through the centuries. It's this original Russia, a boreal Russia, that I wanted to find. My journey began at the entrance of this nearly closed sea, on a shore called the Winter Coast. From there, I would reach the city of Arkhangelsk and its port amidst the ice, before reaching the mythical archipelago of the Solovetsky Islands. I would follow the White Sea Canal to the hinterland called Karelia. Finally, I would go up to the north coast, the remote refuge of the last Pomor fishermen. I chose the meandering Mezin River as my starting point. Its frozen waters mark a border with the Arctic. Beyond that, no more roads, tracks, or men. This is where the Pomors used to leave for their ice fishing trips. A few centuries-old wooden izbas remain, which still stand despite the exodus of the inhabitants. In the small village of Lempozhnia, the oldest settlement on the river, some return to settle down in order to revive a life of traditions.
Come on. First one out. Come on, let's go. Go on. Horses, time to eat.
Elena and Andrei have taken over an old izba with a stable. The young couple aims to revive centuries-old traditions and hopes to attract a national tourism, proud of its Arctic saga.
I call them the Liverpool Four. They remind me of the Beatles. I don't know why. I can't explain it.
I'm surprised that young Russians have chosen to isolate themselves in such a harsh country, while those born here often decide to head to the city.
Could you tell us a little bit?
About what?
Why you came to live here?
But for you?
For me? Out of love? Or
No, out of stupidity.
out of stupidity? He came out of stupidity. Do you really think that?
Where are you both from?
I'm from Arkhangelsk, and he's from St. Petersburg. We met on the internet. In Russia, we have a social media site called Contact, and there's a discussion group for those who want to live in the countryside. The state set up an aid plan called the social contract. It's aimed at people who live in villages where there are no jobs and who need support.
It's nice to see that life is coming back to these far-flung Russian villages in the far north, on the shores of the White Sea. It's not something I actually expected to see. On the contrary, I thought I would find abandoned villages. The hushed atmosphere of winter and the old-fashioned village created an immaculate landscape. A magical decor crisscrossed with sleds. A postcard of a Russia of yesteryear. I wasn't expecting it to look like this, as if it were straight out of a fairy tale. Yet I knew that the White Sea had changed considerably since its first inhabitants had lived there. Arkhangelsk, capital of the White Sea. It was the first access to the northern maritime areas under the rule of the Tsars at a time when St. Petersburg was just a vast marsh. It was through this strategic port, nestled in the mouth of the Vina River, that the first maritime exchanges between Russia and Europe took place. The contrast with the old Pomor villages is striking. Arkhangelsk is a port bristling with cranes and full of ice. It's one of those Russian cities that fascinate and entices the world's imagination. Want some help?
Yes.
Ready? Here we go. Good luck.
Thanks.
I really don't regret coming in winter because there's a charm. There's something eminently exotic and very Russian in this city under the snow that's a little hushed. Arkhangelsk's apartment blocks are surrounded by sawmill plants, fish plants, and modern infrastructure. The cold, however, still dictates everything. Separated by a branch of the Vina River, the inhabitants of an island district must walk on the ice in order to reach the city center. As I began the 3-kilometer-long crossing, I met Aliona, who makes the journey twice a day. Tell me, what is this crossing?
It's an ice bridge that allows the inhabitants of Kego Island to reach the city center. When the ice becomes thick and dense enough, we open this passage and the locals can go to school, work, the university, the city, and so on. On the island, we live a very simple village life.
But it's a neighborhood of Arkhangelsk.
Yes, it's a neighborhood of Arkhangelsk, but an island.
Aliona led me to the center of this frozen river branch. It still has a channel that the icebreakers have to open and reopen every day so that boats can access the White Sea. Somewhere over there in the fog. It's a level crossing like I'd never seen before. On one side, pedestrians waiting on the frozen waters. On the other, the icebreakers emerging from the fog. In the middle, a very fragile footbridge and a shack occupied by a security guard. Aliona knows him. His name is Sergei. For years, he's been watching over this atypical crossroad. What does your job entail? How do you measure the ice?
I have to remove the wooden bridge so that the boats can pass. Then put it back in place so people can go to work or get home.
And how long is the crossing passable?
Usually from about December to mid-April.
Do you measure the thickness yourself?
Yes, it's 27 centimeters thick today.
27 centimeters thick?
This morning I measured at 8 a.m. or 7:30 and I reported it to the control center. If the thickness is less than 25 centimeters, no one is allowed to cross.
So for now, everything's fine.
Yes, another 2 centimeters and we'll have to reassess.
I continued my quest for the boreal origins of Russia. Flying over the frozen shores, I could hardly believe that I was finally flying towards the famous Solovetsky archipelago. I had read and heard so many testimonies about these lands lost in the heart of the White Sea. On the main island stands the northernmost monastery in the world, where the echoes of history still resonate. The Solovetsky monastery was founded in the 15th century by Orthodox monks. Transformed into a true monastic state, it then reigned undivided over the White Sea and its Pomor subjects for centuries. It defended the gates of the Arctic on behalf of the Tsar in the face of Scandinavian incursions. The walls are quite impressive. It looks like a Russian colossus stacked these blocks. Let's not forget that the Solovetsky Islands were above all a fortress. The monastic fortress was under siege many times over the course of its history. But its walls held on, and the imposing building seems to emerge intact from a medieval past. I had an appointment with Olga at the time of morning prayer. In this masculine Orthodox monastery, she has the status of an inokinia. That is, without being a nun, she has nevertheless renounced the outside world. She works in the administration. I asked her to reveal the secrets of the archipelago and the nooks and crannies of the fortress. Before we started our wall walk, Olga wanted to show me a chapel where she likes to come and pray. It's the oldest and best preserved of all the churches, a shrine where religious treasures were saved from looting when the Bolsheviks arrived. The fortress ramparts appear as they did in the 15th century, when they defended Russia's northern borders.
Every summer, the Tsar sent troops, almost 1,000 men. In the winter, they left.
Really?
Yes, because...
Because the ice was enough to defend the fortress?
Yes. In any case, it was impossible to land on the island in the winter, and complicated to feed and house so many men.
Olga and I agreed to meet again after her workday. I had the opportunity to wander through the medieval alleys that were being restored. The various churches regained their religious function and crosses rise again to the sky. During the Soviet era, red stars overlooked those golden onion domes. It's really an important place in Russia, a major religious center and a historic site because of the dramatic history of the Gulag. These buildings that now house monks were the cells of the first prisoners of the Gulag. From 1920 to 1939, the Solovetsky Islands were known as the Gulag Laboratory. This is where the tragedy started, behind these windows. Beginning in the 1920s, the Bolshevik authorities transformed the Solovetsky monastery into a so-called re-education through labor camp. The monks and popes were mixed with counter-revolutionaries and other political prisoners, not to mention regular criminals. The Solovetsky Islands thus became the first camp of what would later be called the Gulag. Forced labor, punitive cells, and summary executions were first experienced here, before spreading throughout Eurasia. In 1939, the war against Finland forced Stalin to close the Solovetsky camp. But in the meantime, hundreds more had emerged in the USSR.
You're very well stocked. At your service. We're working for you. The grapes? I weighed them. Your change, 750 rebels. There are about 1,000 people in Solovetsky. Actually, it's a little less. Maybe 150 or 900.
Which way do we go?
This way. The bells are ringing. The monks are about to have a procession from the refectory.
Are you from a religious family?
No, not a religious family. We were ordinary Soviet people. My father was an excellent radio engineer. He wasn't in the military, but worked for the army as a civilian. In the 1990s, when there was a great popular movement towards religion, we find our way to the church, one at a time. Family heritage played a part. I had a very pious grandmother, and I remember her crossing herself. I used to say, "Babushka, what are you doing?" She would reply that she was praying. We would laugh. We were young. We didn't understand. I first came here on a pilgrimage, like many people who wanted to visit this sacred land. That was in 2003. The priests and the masses touched me in the depth of my soul. I had a feeling that I shouldn't look any further. Nothing else mattered other than the Solovetsky Islands. Going back became my goal. And when I did so, it was like a sip of water or a breath of fresh air that I had waited for all year.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great.
What a beautiful snowmobile you have.
Yes, it's my white horse. I love it. I gave it a try one day and I got hooked. It gave me an adrenaline rush. Shall we go?
Come on, let's go.
Sit on my white horse.
Thanks.
That morning, Olga took me to an infamous place of the Solovetsky Islands, one of the retreats that were converted into punitive cells during the Stalin era. Perched on her powerful snowmobile, we crossed lakes and forests. I discovered another Olga, fearless and mischievous. Olga's a modern believer, as assiduous in church as she is madly in love with these White Sea Islands.
Hi.
Hi. Masha's a friend of Olga's. She met us on the hill of Sekirka, at the foot of a church that also serves as a lighthouse. The bell tower has a lens at the top, on which stands a cross, the legacy of a time when monks traded as much as they prayed. Masha's father was responsible for running it for a long time. Today, the building has regained its religious function under Father Matvey.
We're in the lighthouse. It's my brightest childhood memory.
How so?
The view was like looking out the windows of an airplane. It's breathtaking. My father worked here until 2005. He lit the lighthouse, carried the batteries, repainted, did maintenance. It's amazing that the lens survived the Gulag.
In the 1980s, Masha's father discovered letters from former inmates abandoned in a sealed room. They were desperate missives that had never been sent. Father Matvey showed me their exact location. Upon entering the room after him, I felt like I saw the ghosts of those who were referred to as counter-revolutionaries, despite usually being just unfortunate innocents.
Back in those days, a locker room was set up. Inmates were undressed, their clothes taken and left on hangers.
As I understand it, this is where the letters were found.
Yes, because that's where their belongings were kept, and where some died or were shot.
In these letters, for example, one could read,
You ask how I am, how long I'll be deported to the Solovetsky Islands, and when I'll return home. The simple answer is, I was given an 8-year sentence for being an enemy of the people. I'll be free in 1938, and if they release me, I will return. Otherwise, I'll be deported to Siberia.
Masha invited me for dinner. She lives with her parents and daughter Zenia, across from the monastery. I wanted to know more about the letters found by her father, Sergei. In Russia, the dark periods of history are buried deep within people's souls. You found these letters.
I didn't read them. Of course not. It was in 1987, at the beginning of the summer. It was still in the time of the Soviet Union. Nevertheless, I wanted to show them. I found them by chance. Did I mention what condition they were in?
Tell me about that.
There was some rubble and some pieces of paper protruding from the rubble. They were used by the guards as toilet paper. I started clearing away with my boots, and I found a pile of paper about this size.
Lubov, Masha's mother, was a math teacher at the only Solovetsky school. Like most locals, she has always raised chickens and some cattle, in addition to her job, a vital extra income for the people of the island.
I'm from Solovetsky. I was born on the islands a long time ago, in the last century, in 1945. I'm going to be 75. I'm an old lady. Almost everyone in Solovetsky used to have cattle. Last summer, for my birthday, the kids gave me a tablet. It has satellite tracking software. I put a GPS collar on the cows, so I can just stay at home and watch. I can tell where they are. It's very convenient. I highly recommend it.
Now returned to civilians and monks, the Solovetsky archipelago has regained its calm, but it has been through all of Russia's political iterations. The seclusion of the monks gave way to the hell of the prisoners, followed by the stronghold of the military. The world's remote places serve as either a retreat or a place of deportation. It's a no-brainer that suddenly came to mind as I left the archipelago. The memory of the Gulag followed me to the continent, where I continued my quest for the Russian far north. In 1931, most of the prisoners in the Solovetsky archipelago were assigned to the first major Stalinist construction site. The aim was to build a canal to the Baltic Sea. The Pomor Canal, as the Russians call it, is 900 kilometers long, 227 of which were dug manually by the prisoners of the Gulag. The rest winds through the labyrinth of lakes and forests of Karelia, the immense hinterland of the White Sea. This is where the White Sea Canal begins. I'm coming from the Solovetsky, just offshore, and here's the first semaphore, the first lock. I'm going to continue my journey heading south, along the White Sea Canal that runs through Karelia. Near the coastal lock, I walked in a suburb along the channel. Arina, a young woman from Belomorsk, accompanied me. Is there still economic activity here?
No, there's neither work, nor kindergarten or school. Soon there won't be any children here.
The Belomorsk Canal was built by prisoners, wasn't it?
Yes, by the prisoners. It's a cruel story. Those who were exhausted froze to death and were thrown into pits from which they couldn't escape.
How does the younger generation, you for example, feel about this story?
It's tragic, because it's all terrible. Our White Sea Canal is said to be built on a mass grave, because so many people perished. And it's sad to remember all of this and discover even more new elements.
The digging of the canal began in September 1931. These were the first major works that massively used the Gulag's labor. Stalin wanted a show of force and lightning-fast construction. For 20 months, about 250,000 inmates took turns in all types of weather, in all temperatures. And for every 1 man out of 10, the canal turned into a tomb.
There is no memorial to the prisoners. In the past, those who dug the canal were not considered human beings. In fact, they were slaves. They were ordered to dig, and so they dug.
There are library books, the works of historians, there are archives. And then there's coming here and listening to the inhabitants. Today's generation has freed itself from the prohibition that was prevalent in Soviet society and the one that grew under the USSR. Young people have a significant distance, almost a century from the time of the Gulag, and now they want to talk about it. I feel it every time. They want to talk about it freely. I'll leave you here. Thank you very much. Goodbye, and thank you for showing me the place.
Bye.
There's a tremendous melancholy that emerges from these places because of the sadness of history and of the present. Here we're in a village on the canal that will close because the coal-fired power plant is too expensive for the number of people who live here. So they're going to be evacuated and relocated, and this will become a ruin, like so many others in the Russian far north. By connecting the White Sea to the Volga and the Don River, the Belomor Canal was also intended to connect the Arctic to the Caspian Sea or the Black Sea. However, when it was inaugurated in 1933, there was no denying the obvious. The channel was neither wide nor deep enough to accommodate large tonnage ships. Only medium-sized boats still use it today, as the Russian state is undertaking its renovation. The Belomor Canal took me to the gigantic Onega Lake. I was in the middle of Karelia. This huge wooded area of the former Novgorod Republic was the starting point of the colonization of the shores of the White Sea. The monks who founded the Solovetsky monastery came from there. In these woods, I could still hear the heart of an old forest civilization, an ancestral Russia that built churches and ships with an axe. This is Karelia, a gigantic land covered with forests, dotted with marshes, and studded with lakes. Karelia stretches across 2 countries, Russia and Finland. We're in a part of Russia that has suffered a lot from its Scandinavian neighbors, the Kingdom of Sweden and the Varangians, otherwise known as the Norwegian Vikings. And this Russia was built in contact with Northern Europe. I had long been dreaming of admiring the 22 onion domes of the Transfiguration Church of the Kizhi Pogost, a beacon of orthodoxy in the middle of the Karelian taigas. After 40 years of meticulous renovations, the wooden building has finally regained its original appearance. The site is still closed to the public, but Margarita, a guide who speaks my language, opens the doors of the church for me.
In 1714, the church was built on Kizhi Island, and it was a church that was very important to the parish. There were a lot of villages nearby. The people of the region all pitched in to build it.
I wondered how such an assembly of beams and carpentry could have weathered the throes of time. Far from the stone buildings of St. Petersburg, the Russian north is a veritable architectural conservatory. The church in Kizhi is the flamboyant remnant of a wooden civilization. They used to work with an axe, correct?
Yes, that's right.
They couldn't just cut with a saw?
Resin would come out slowly, but with an axe, the pores close.
Is it thanks to the axe that this church is still here today?
Yes, it's thanks to the axe and the old way of treating wood.
No mass takes place in winter in the chancel left in the grip of chilling temperatures. But this place undeniably has a soul. I could see why it had been so popular since the fall of the USSR. The Russians find their roots here, the roots of a pious nation scattered in its vastness. I figured it took a foolproof faith to move further north, towards the unknown waters of the White Sea and the Arctic. At the nearest station, I boarded a train on the Moscow-Murmansk line. It is the northernmost railway in the world. As everywhere in Russia, rail offers the best answer to the vastness of the taigas. And it was a joy for me to rediscover the atmosphere of the sleeper cars where I'd spent so many nights. I'm here sitting comfortably on this train called the Arktika, because in Russia, trains have names, and this one is quite eloquent. It leads straight to the Russian Arctic. I'll get off a little earlier to explore the western shores of the White Sea. I got off at Kandalaksha, a port once dedicated to the timber trade, but now abandoned by ships. I crossed the Arctic Circle during my sleep. Here, winter is deeper and more pristine. Once past industries and the last suburbs, boreal nature immediately takes over. The magic of a truly white sea left me thinking for a long time. Icebreakers rarely go by this coast. I wondered how the Pomor people were able to survive this climate. People here drive faster on the frozen and snowy tracks than between the potholes that appear in the summer. I was going full speed between the taiga and the coastal sea ice. The izbas line the banks of the Vazuga River, which flows into the nearby north coast of the White Sea. Here, for many Russians, fishing is still a vital activity, and I wanted to know how it endures in the 21st century. Near the village, I had an appointment with Mikhail Belousov, a retired fishery guard. He had devoted his life to hunting down poachers, both under the USSR and afterwards. I followed him to his hut at the mouth of the river.
I must have some pictures of some elk somewhere.
What year was this? Was it still in Soviet times?
No, it was afterwards.
Aren't there fewer fish in the White Sea than before?
Under the USSR, at the end of the Soviet era, there was already talk of declining fish stocks and the need to limit fishing and take protective measures. But when the system collapsed, people had other concerns than ecology. And on the contrary, everyone started to exploit recklessly.
So the reason why the Pomors, the first inhabitants, came here, meaning the fish, is it over today?
Obviously, yes. Humans are the enemy of nature. There's nothing else to say. They don't take advantage of this authentic fishing. Everything goes to foreign hands. The inhabitants who live here, who grew up here, and to whom God gave the right to fish, can no longer make a living from it.
Off camera, Mikhail told me about the tragedy that had led him to retire. Threatened by a poacher, he had to use his service weapon one day. Mikhail received a suspended sentence and death threats. It was a bitter end to his career. We're going this way, right?
Yes, straight ahead.
Explain to me who's fishing there.
Well, these are men and women from the village.
They fish for themselves?
For themselves or for the kolkhoz, the collective farm. The kolkhoz then sends the fruit of this labor to the fish factories in Murmansk.
It's still called the kolkhoz?
Yes, the fishing kolkhoz, the advent of communism.
It's still called that.
Yes, it's exotic.
They come every day
Yes.
and pierce their holes with that drill. How thick is the ice?
Up to the screw handle.
Why is he doing that?
For it to bite.
Anything biting?
So far, I've caught this.
What kind of fish is that?
Laveret.
How many do you catch in a day?
Yesterday with my friends, we caught about 40 or 50.
That many. These modest fishermen spend the day on the ice at the mouth of the Varzuga River. Offshore fishing remains another matter. Mikhail pointed out a man further down the coast who descended directly from a line of Pomor fishermen. I was surprised. Were there still authentic heirs of these pioneers of the far north? Since the beginning of my journey, people had only spoken of them in the past tense. I went in search of this Pomor, whose meeting would offer an unexpected outcome to my tour of the White Sea. Hello.
Welcome.
Cédric.
Sergei.
Sergei, the real Pomor, as I was told.
The real thing, yes. I'm ninth generation Pomor, and my son is 10th.
So the first generation who lived here.
That was in 1673. They arrived from Arkhangelsk. The Pomors came from Novgorod around the 11th or 12th century. They're real Russians. My ancestors, as far as I know, came in the 17th century.
So you're a real White Sea man.
Yes, so to speak.
What's written on the cross?
Let's go and have a look. It's in memory of the Pomors, our ancestors.
And why did you erect this cross?
Simply because we had to. One day this house will disappear and there'll be nothing left, but the cross will remain and people will remember. The Pomors went all the way to Spitsbergen. When the Norwegians got there, they found traces of their encampments.
Sergei was a force of nature. Despite the winter temperature, he seemed unaffected by the cold. I was impressed by this colossus of the White Sea and moved by this place where his ancestors came to settle. He doesn't fish in winter, but he comes to this hut with his son to prepare his nets. Hi.
Hi.
You're not saying hi to your dad?
It's nice and hot in here. As soon as the waters are clear, he goes out to sea every day aboard his kosh, the small traditional sailboat of the Pomors. He catches mainly cod, and instead of bringing it to the Solovetsky monastery, as his forefathers did, he takes it to a canning factory.
Let's eat, okay?
I'd love to.
Put it there, Syria.
What kind of meat is this?
It's elk. I bought it from a friend who hunted it, with a license, of course.
Thank you very much. I've never tasted elk meat before. Do you fish too, Karelia?
Yes.
Yes? Often?
Yes, often.
What kind, for example, did you fish for together?
Usually herring and salmon.
Salmon. Have you ever experienced dangerous situations at sea?
One day, a few years ago, it was November the 22nd. It was already minus 15 degrees. I was finishing my day of fishing. I rowed to the nets, some 70 to 80 meters from the shore. It wasn't very far, but the wind was so strong that my boat was pushed. I tried hard to reach the net, but the oar broke. I began to drift towards Arkhangelsk.
You didn't have an engine?
No, we don't use an engine, so it doesn't get tangled up in the nets. I was drifting. Of course, I tried to row, but with a single oar it didn't work. I had to make the decision to jump in the water because it was already dusk and there was no one else in sight. I swallowed some water, but what saved me was thinking about my son. I reached the shore and the rocks. I lay down for 10 minutes with my heart pounding. And when I looked towards the boat, it was already 5 kilometers away, almost invisible.
It's a very risky job.
Yes, very dangerous. That's why I don't really want my son to do it. But if he really wants to do it, he'll do it for a living.
Do you want to be a fisherman?
I haven't decided yet.
You're right. You have time. How old are you?
He's 11.
First, you have to finish school.
He's in 6th grade. He'll see, then he'll decide.
Sure.
Леша, отдай ему палочку сюда. Отдай. Иди сюда. Иди на место. Можно? Стояли по-другому. Слышишь, вот этот камень полуглазый, да. Садись так, как это.
Is this pretty much the edge of the ice bank?
Называется Жак.
Yes, it's called Sekoshish.
Is it like this every year? Is there less ice than usual?
This is the first time I've seen this. The water's very close. Usually there's 5 to 10 kilometers of ice still. It's a very mild winter. The first time the sea hasn't frozen. This isn't normal. But for us fishermen, it's good that the ice is retreating quickly. Around May the 20th, the herring will move to shore and we'll start fishing. It's a good thing for us, assuming anyone wants this herring.
My tour of the White Sea on the trails of the Russian far north was coming to an end. I was able to explore the shores of this small sea that was once a gateway to the world for Russia. I enjoyed seeing it successively medieval, then Soviet, modern, or authentic. It's replete with testimonies, those of an austere and pious life, whether dramatic or contemporary, in the eternal beauty of the Arctic. I'm very happy. Sergei lent me his good old Russian hunter skis. It allowed me to reach this point at the edge of the ice floe. Behind me is the gully, the narrowing of the White Sea that then opens into the Arctic and the Barents Sea. We've come full circle. A trip always starts on a map. I had often looked at this little sea on the edge of the Arctic and the absolutely gigantic polar world. And I always wondered how people lived on these salty yet frozen shores. And in the last few weeks, I was finally able to make this dream come true. I was able to put images and faces to the extremely dreamlike name of the White Sea. Today, the White Sea has lost some importance. Major ports have taken over the Arctic, the Baltic Sea, and the Russian Pacific. The White Sea is almost an inland sea, forgotten in the far north. But its history and that of the Pomors remain the foundation of Arctic Russia. At a time when the Arctic is becoming a highly geopolitical space, the memory of these courageous forerunners underlines how the Russian people have always looked to the north.